Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal of the observation deck's viewport, watching the debris field slowly drift past the human exploration vessel New Horizon. What had once been a thriving space station now floated in twisted fragments, its hull scarred by plasma burns and kinetic strikes. But it wasn't the destruction that made her stomach clench. It was the small escape pods scattered among the wreckage, their emergency beacons long since fallen silent. "How many survivors did we manage to recover?" she asked, not turning from the viewport. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun checked her datapad, her expression grim. 47 so far. Medical Bay says most are in critical condition. Dr. Morrison is working around the clock, but she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Elena finally turned, her dark eyes reflecting both exhaustion and determination. "But what's Sarah?" "Ma'am, these aren't human survivors. Command is asking what our intentions are regarding non-human refugees." The weight of those words settled in the air between them. In the 3 years since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and made first contact with the Galactic Confederation, they had learned that the universe was far more complex and often crueler than they had imagined. The Confederation was a sprawling alliance of dozens of species, governed by strict hierarchies and ancient prejudices that humanity was only beginning to understand. Elena walked to the communications console. "Patch me through to the medical bay." Dr. James Morrison's voice crackled through the speakers, strain evident in every syllable. "Captain, thank God you called. I need more surgical supplies and at least 3 more medical technicians. These patients, I've never seen anything like some of these injuries." "Doctor, what species are we dealing with?" There was a pause before Morrison replied. "That's the thing, Captain. I'm seeing at least 6 different species here, and according to my xenobiology database, several of them shouldn't even be able to survive in the same atmospheric conditions. Yet they were all on that station together." Elena exchanged glances with Chun. "Elaborate, Doctor." "Well, I've got 3 Zephyrians, those tall, crystalline beings from the Andromeda sector. Beautiful people, but their homeworld was supposedly cleansed by the Confederation 5 years ago for genetic deviance. I've also got a family of Korth, the reptilian species with the incredible mathematical abilities. Problem is, the Korth were declared extinct after their sun was artificially collapsed by Confederation forces for economic restructuring." The captain felt a chill run down her spine. "What else?" 2 ethereals, those energy beings that can shift between corporeal and non-corporeal states. The Confederation banned their existence 3 years ago, calling them unnatural aberrations. "And Captain," Morrison's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "I got a seedling." Sarah Chun gasped audibly. Even humans, newcomers to galactic politics, knew about the seedlings. They were a peaceful plant-based species with the ability to accelerate the growth of vegetation and heal damaged ecosystems. The Confederation had systematically hunted them to near extinction, claiming they were an ecological threat that could destabilize entire planetary biospheres. "How is the seedling's condition?" Elena asked. "Stable, but barely. Someone tried to burn off its root system with industrial acid. The resilience these beings show, it's remarkable. They should all be dead, but somehow they keep fighting to survive." Elena made her decision. "Doctor, use whatever resources you need. I don't care if we have to cannibalize half the ship's systems. Keep them alive." "Captain," Chun interjected, "Command's orders were to observe and report. Taking on refugees, especially these refugees, could be considered an act of defiance against Confederation policy." Elena turned to face her second-in-command, her jaw set with determination. "Sarah, when did we start following Confederation policy on matters of basic humanitarian aid?" "Since they control most of the major trade routes and have weapons that could turn Earth into cosmic dust," Chun replied honestly. The captain was quiet for a moment, considering her options. The New Horizon was part of humanity's first deep space exploration fleet, tasked with making contact with new species and gathering information about the galaxy beyond Earth's solar system. They have been operating under strict protocols designed to avoid antagonizing the powerful Confederation while establishing humanity's place among the stars. But, looking at the wreckage outside, Elena couldn't reconcile those protocols with what she was witnessing. "Ma'am," Chen said softly, "I'm not arguing against helping them. I'm just pointing out that there will be consequences." Elena nodded, understanding the position her officer was in. "Send a message to Earth Command. Inform them that we have encountered survivors of what appears to be a systematic extermination operation. Tell them we are providing emergency humanitarian aid and request immediate guidance on refugee protocols. And if Command orders us to abandon them." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena had served in Earth's space fleet for 15 years, working her way up from a junior navigator to commanding one of humanity's most advanced exploration vessels. She had always followed orders, always trusted that the chain of command would make the right decisions. But this felt different. "We'll deal with that when it happens," she said finally. Over the next several hours, the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize their unexpected patients. Elena found herself making regular trips to the medical bay, partly to check on their condition, but mostly because she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would define not just her career, but humanity's role in the galaxy. Dr. Morrison was examining one of the Zephyrians when she arrived. The being's crystalline body was cracked in several places, leaking a luminescent blue fluid that Morrison was carefully sealing with a biocompatible polymer. "How are they responding to treatment?" Elena asked. "Better than expected. Their physiology is fascinating. The crystal matrix actually helps accelerate healing once we stabilize the fractures." "But Captain," Morrison paused his work and looked at her directly. "They're not just physically injured. They're traumatized. All of them." Elena watched as the Zephyrian's large, multifaceted eyes tracked her movement. Despite the obvious pain, there was an intelligence there that reminded her uncomfortably of a refugee camp she had visited during her early military service. The same mixture of hope and despair, the same careful assessment of whether this new authority figure represented safety or another threat. "Have any of them been able to communicate?" "The Korth family has been trying to speak with us. Their translator seems to be working, but they're cautious. The parents keep positioning themselves between their young and any humans who approach." Elena nodded understanding. "What about the seedling?" Morrison's expression softened. "Actually, that's the most remarkable case. The seedling has been trying to help heal the others. Despite its own injuries, it's been releasing spores that seem to have analgesic and regenerative properties. It's been particularly attentive to the smallest Korth, the child." The captain felt something shift in her chest. These beings, hunted and broken by the galaxy's most powerful alliance, were still caring for each other, still finding ways to show compassion despite everything they had endured. "Doctor, I want to speak with whoever is most able to communicate. We need to understand what happened here." An hour later, Elena sat across from THYSS, the eldest of the Korth. The reptilian being's scales were a deep emerald color, marked with intricate patterns that Morrison explained were indicators of advanced age and wisdom among his species. Despite the translator's mechanical tone, there was a dignity in THYSS's bearing that commanded respect. "Human Captain," THYSS began, his throat producing a series of clicks and hisses that the translator rendered into accented English. "You show kindness to those the galaxy has forgotten. This is unexpected." Elena leaned forward slightly. "THYSS, can you tell me what happened to your station?" The Korth's large eyes blinked slowly. A gesture the translator indicated was similar to a human sigh. "We called a haven. It was hidden in the debris field of this dead system, built over many cycles by those who had escaped the Confederation's cleansing operations. We thought we were safe." "How many species were living there?" 12, THYSS replied. "Representatives of races the Confederation had declared extinct, deviant, or unworthy of existence. We had created a small community, sharing knowledge and resources. The seedling helped us grow food in hydroponic gardens. The ethereals provided energy for our systems. My people calculated hyperspace routes to keep us hidden from patrol fleets. Elena felt a growing anger at what she was hearing. What changed? Someone betrayed our location. 3 Confederation dreadnoughts arrived without warning. They offered no terms, made no demands. They simply began destroying everything. THYSS's translator couldn't convey emotion, but Elena could see the pain in the being's posture. We had perhaps 30 minutes to evacuate what few escape pods we had. Most of our people, they died defending the others' escape. The captain sat back in her chair, processing the implications. THYSS, why didn't you try to contact the Confederation authorities? Surely there must be some legal process, some appeal system for species facing extinction orders. THYSS made a sound that the translator rendered as bitter laughter. Human captain, you are new to this galaxy. You still believe that law and justice are the same thing. The Confederation's legal system serves only those species powerful enough to enforce their will. The rest of us exist at their sufferance until we become inconvenient. Elena was quiet for a long moment. In her briefings about galactic politics, she had been told that the Confederation was a stabilizing force that maintained peace and order among the stars. The reality she was discovering painted a very different picture. What will you do now? She asked. We will hide again if we survive. Find some other forgotten corner of space and hope we can remain invisible long enough to rebuild. Unless, human captain, what is your species' position on refugees? It was a simple question that struck at the heart of everything Elena had been grappling with since they discovered the survivors. Humanity had only recently joined the galactic community. They had been eager to establish trade relationships and gain access to advanced technologies. Taking in refugees from species the Confederation had declared extinct could jeopardize everything Earth was trying to achieve. But looking at THYSS, thinking about the seedling using its remaining strength to heal others, Elena realized that some decisions transcended political calculations. I can't speak for my entire species, she said carefully, but I believe humans understand what it means to fight for survival against overwhelming odds. We understand the value of diversity and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. THYSS's scales shifted color slightly, which the translator indicated was a sign of surprise. You would risk your species standing with the Confederation for strangers? Elena stood, making her decision. THYSS, I'm going to make you an offer. My ship is equipped for long-range exploration, which means we have the supplies and space for extended missions. If your people are willing, I'd like to offer you passage to human space. It's not much. We only control one star system, but it's outside Confederation authority. The Korth was silent for a long moment, his large eyes studying Elena intently. Human captain, you understand that harboring us will mark your species as enemies of the Confederation? Maybe, Elena replied. But if that's the price of doing what's right, then it's a price worth paying. As if summoned by her words, Lieutenant Commander Chen's voice crackled through the comm system. Captain, urgent message from Earth Command. Elena excused herself and made her way to the bridge, where Chun handed her the decoded transmission with a grim expression. Earth Command to New Horizon, the message began. You are ordered to immediately cease all contact with non-Confederation species and report to Starbase Alpha for debriefing. Any interference with Confederation internal affairs is strictly forbidden under Treaty Article 7. Compliance is mandatory. Elena read the message twice, then looked at Chun. What's our ETA to the nearest human outpost? Approximately 6 days at maximum warp, Chun replied. And how long until we finish repairs to the survivors' escape pods? Chun consulted her datapad. Engineering estimates another 12 hours to make them space-worthy. Elena nodded, walking to the captain's chair. The weight of command had never felt heavier, but her path forward had never been clearer. Lieutenant Commander, Please inform all department heads that we'll be taking a slight detour before returning to human space. And send a message to the survivors. Tell them they're welcome aboard the New Horizon for as long as they need sanctuary. Chun hesitated. Captain, command's orders were explicit. Elena looked out at the debris field one more time, thinking about the beings in their medical bay who had lost everything except their lives. Sometimes, Sarah, following orders and doing what's right aren't the same thing. And sometimes you have to decide which one matters more. As the New Horizon changed course away from Confederation space and toward humanity's small corner of the galaxy, Elena couldn't help but wonder if she had just started something much larger than a rescue mission. Perhaps she had started a revolution. In the medical bay, THYSS was explaining to his family that they might have found something unprecedented in their long struggle for survival. A species that measured strength not by the ability to destroy, but by the courage to protect those who needed protection. For the first time in years, the survivors of Haven Station dared to hope that their exile might finally be ending. And in the depths of space, a human captain made a choice that would echo across the galaxy, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can spark the greatest changes. The stars stretched ahead, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. But for the first time since they had fled their dying homeworlds, the refugees were not running toward an uncertain future alone. They had found something they had never expected to discover among the vast indifference of space. Allies who believed that every life had value, regardless of species or origin. The galaxy had cast them out, but humanity was taking them in. And that simple act of compassion would change everything. The journey to human space took 8 days instead of the planned 6. Captain Elena Vasquez had deliberately chosen a longer route that avoided the major hyperspace lanes, hoping to minimize their chances of encountering Confederation patrols. The New Horizon wasn't equipped for military confrontation, and the last thing their refugee passengers needed was another violent encounter. During those 8 days, something remarkable began to happen aboard the ship. What had started as a humanitarian rescue mission gradually transformed into something none of them had expected: the birth of an interspecies community. Dr. Morrison had initially worried about contamination protocols and the challenges of treating multiple alien physiologies, but he quickly discovered that the refugees were not only cooperative patients, but also valuable teachers. THYSS, the elderly Korth, possessed medical knowledge that spanned centuries of treating various species. The surviving ethereals could manipulate energy fields in ways that accelerated healing, while the seedlings' natural biochemistry produced compounds that proved effective against infections that normally plague space travelers. Elena found herself spending more time in the makeshift refugee quarters than on the bridge, fascinated by the wealth of knowledge and experience these beings represented. Each conversation revealed new aspects of galactic history that humanity's brief contact with the Confederation had never touched upon. "Your species is fortunate," Zara, one of the ethereals, had told her during their 3rd day out from the debris field. The energy being flickered between solid and translucent states as it spoke, a habit that Elena had learned indicated deep thought. You have achieved interstellar travel without losing your capacity for empathy. Most species abandon such qualities long before they reach the stars. "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "The Confederation teaches that survival requires strength, and strength requires the elimination of weakness. Any species that cannot defend itself is considered a liability to galactic stability. Your willingness to help us defies their fundamental philosophy." Elena had pondered those words for hours afterward. Humanity's first contacts with the Confederation had been carefully orchestrated diplomatic exchanges designed to impress the Galactic Alliance with human potential while avoiding any actions that might be seen as threatening. Earth's leaders had been so focused on gaining acceptance that they had never questioned what they might have to compromise in return. But now, watching the refugees slowly begin to trust their human rescuers, Elena was beginning to understand that acceptance into the Confederation might come at a price humanity was not prepared to pay. On the fifth day, she was reviewing navigation charts when Lieutenant Commander Chen approached with a data tablet and an unusually serious expression. "Captain, we've received several long-range communications that I think you need to see." Elena accepted the tablet and began reading. The first message was from Earth Command, expressing growing concern about the New Horizons' failure to respond to their previous orders. The tone was stern, but still within the bounds of normal military communication. The second message was more troubling. It was an official inquiry from the Confederation Office of Species Management requesting information about human activities in Sector 77 Delta. The language was formal and polite, but Elena recognized it as a warning shot. The third message made her blood run cold. It was a news bulletin from the Galactic Information Network, reporting that human exploration vessel New Horizon was suspected of harboring dangerous criminal elements, and that any species providing aid to the vessel would be considered in violation of Confederation security protocols. "They're painting us as criminals," Elena said quietly. Chen nodded grimly. "It gets worse. I've been monitoring Confederation military frequencies. There's a task force being assembled to investigate irregularities in human exploration activities. 3 heavy cruisers and a command carrier." Elena felt the weight of her decision settling on her shoulders. She had known there would be consequences, but the speed and scale of the Confederation's response was sobering. How long before they reach human space? At their current trajectory, approximately 10 days. "But Captain," Chen paused, clearly struggling with something. "There's something else. I've been analyzing the survivor testimonies, cross-referencing them with our intelligence database. The pattern of attacks on refugee populations isn't random. It's systematic." Elena looked up from the messages. "Explain." "Every species we're carrying was targeted not because they were dangerous, but because they possessed something the Confederation wanted. The Korth were eliminated after their mathematical discoveries led to breakthroughs in hyperspace navigation that could have made the Confederation's control of trade routes obsolete. The Zephyrians were wiped out after they developed crystal-based computing technology that was centuries ahead of anything the Confederation possessed. The Ethereals were hunted because their energy manipulation abilities could revolutionize power generation." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. "You're saying the Confederation isn't maintaining galactic stability. They're eliminating potential competition." "It appears that way. And, Captain, there's one more thing. According to the refugees, humanity isn't the first newcomer species to be offered membership in the Confederation. But we might be the first to question their methods before it was too late." Elena sat heavily in her command chair, processing this revelation. Humanity had been so proud of their rapid acceptance into galactic civilization, never suspecting that they might be walking into a carefully constructed trap. "Sarah, how much do we really know about what happened to the other species that joined the Confederation before us?" Chen consulted her tablet again. According to official records, most achieved full integration within a few decades and now contribute to galactic stability as productive member worlds. "But Captain," she hesitated again. "But what?" "According to our passengers, several of those species don't exist anymore except as Confederation client states. Their original cultures, languages, and social structures were gradually absorbed and replaced with Confederation standards. They weren't destroyed, they were assimilated." Elena stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed far less welcoming than they had a week ago. "What you're describing isn't membership in an alliance. It's cultural genocide carried out slowly enough that no one notices until it's too late." Before Chun could respond, the ship's communication system activated. "Captain, to the bridge immediately. We're receiving a priority transmission." Elena and Chun rushed to the bridge, where Communications Officer Martinez was already working to decode the incoming message. "It's from Earth, ma'am, but not through normal command channels. The encryption is civilian-grade, and the routing suggests it came through at least 4 relay stations. On screen, the image that appeared was of Dr. Sarah Kim, head of the Human Xenobiology Institute, and one of Elena's former professors at the academy. But instead of the sterile laboratory Elena remembered, Kim appeared to be speaking from what looked like a secure bunker. Elena, if you're receiving this message, then the situation is worse than we feared. 3 days ago, Confederation representatives arrived at Earth and demanded immediate access to all human research in alien biology and psychology. They claimed it was necessary for our integration process into galactic civilization. Kim paused, glancing off camera before continuing. When our government hesitated, the Confederation made their position clear. We either provide full cooperation or our membership application would be reconsidered. Elena, they're not just asking for scientific data. They want complete cultural profiles, psychological assessments, and what they call optimization recommendations for human society. Elena felt her hands clench into fists as Kim's message continued. I've been in contact with several other xenobiologists who've been studying the refugee testimonies that have surfaced over the past few months. We believe the Confederation has been using this integration process to systematically eliminate the unique characteristics of member species. They're creating a galaxy-spanning monoculture, Elena, and we think humanity is next. The image flickered as Kim moved closer to the camera. There's a resistance forming, Elena. Scientists, diplomats, military officers, people who believe that humanity's diversity is our strength, not a weakness to be corrected. We need allies, and we need proof of what the Confederation is really doing. Whatever you discovered out there, it might be the key to stopping this before it's too late. The message ended with coordinates for a secure rendezvous point in the outer rim of human space. Elena stood in silence for several moments, absorbing the full scope of what they were facing. It wasn't just about rescuing a handful of refugees anymore. They had stumbled onto evidence of a conspiracy that threatened not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy. Captain, Martinez said quietly, we're receiving another transmission. This one's from the refugee quarters. Put it through. THYSS's voice filled the bridge, carrying a formality that suggested he was speaking on behalf of all the survivors. Human Captain Elena, we have been discussing our situation among ourselves. We understand that helping us has placed your species in great danger. Elena activated the comm to respond. THYSS, you're our passengers now. What happens to you is our responsibility. Respectfully, Human Captain, we believe you are wrong. What happens to us is our responsibility. And we have decided that we will not allow your species to suffer for their kindness toward us. Elena exchanged glances with Chun, not liking the direction this conversation was heading. What are you proposing, THYSS? We wish to contribute to the resistance your Dr. Kim mentioned. Each of our species possessed knowledge that the Confederation coveted and ultimately stole. We remember what they took, and we can help your people understand what they're truly facing. The court's voice grew stronger as he continued. More importantly, we know the locations of other refugee populations, hidden communities throughout the galaxy where survivors of the Confederation's integration campaigns have managed to maintain their cultural identity. Alone, none of us were strong enough to resist. But together, Elena felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced since this crisis began. Hope. THYSS, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Human Captain, for generations our peoples have been running from the Confederation's vision of galactic unity. Perhaps it is time to stop running and start fighting back. Your species has shown us that there are those willing to risk everything for principles they believe in. We would be honored to stand with such allies. Elena looked around the bridge at her officers, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would reshape humanity's future among the stars. THYSS, please ask all our passengers to gather in the main cargo bay in 1 hour. I think it's time we had a proper conversation about what we're going to do next. As the communications channel closed, Elena turned to Chun. Sarah, change course for those coordinates Dr. Kim provided. And sent a message to Earth Command, not through normal channels, through Dr. Kim's network. Tell them that the New Horizon is no longer just a rescue vessel. We're now the flagship of the Galactic Refugee Alliance. Chun smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Elena had seen from her second-in-command since this whole crisis began. Ma'am, should I also mention that we're probably starting an interstellar war? I think they'll figure that out on their own, Elena replied. But, Sarah, make sure they understand that this isn't a war of conquest or territory. This is a war for the right of every species to exist as themselves, not as some Confederation-approved version of who they're supposed to be. An hour later, the cargo bay of the New Horizon hosted the most unusual diplomatic meeting in human history. Representatives of 6 different species, 3 humans, and the seeds of a revolution that would eventually span the galaxy. Elena looked around at the assembled beings, some crystalline, some energy-based, some reptilian, some plant-like, and realized that this diversity wasn't a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. Ladies and gentlemen, beings of all classifications, she began, I think it's time we showed the galaxy what real unity looks like. Outside the cargo bay, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the decisions being made in the small human vessel. But among those stars, word was already beginning to spread through hidden networks and secret communities. The humans had not just taken in refugees, they had given them something far more valuable. They had given them hope that the galaxy could be more than what the Confederation had made it. They had given them allies willing to fight for a future where diversity was celebrated rather than eliminated. The galaxy had cast them out, but humanity had taken them in. And now, together, they were going to fight back. The revolution had begun, carried forward not by weapons or warships, but by the simple radical idea that every species had the right to determine its own destiny. It was an idea that would spread from system to system, inspiring those who had given up hope and terrifying those who profited from the status quo. In the depths of space, refugees became revolutionaries, and a human exploration vessel became the heart of a movement that would reshape the galaxy forever. The meeting point that Dr. Sarah Kim had provided turned out to be a hollowed-out asteroid in the Kuiper Belt, one of dozens of similar installations that humanity had established during their initial expansion into their home system. As the New Horizon approached the coordinates, Elena was surprised to see 3 other vessels already docked to the makeshift station: a Earth Defense Force cruiser, a civilian research vessel, and what appeared to be a heavily modified cargo freighter. Captain, Communications Officer Martinez reported, I'm receiving docking clearance from the station. They're identifying themselves as Haven Base Alpha. Elena smiled at the name choice. Clearly someone had been paying attention to the refugees' story about their destroyed sanctuary. Acknowledged. Take us in, Lieutenant. The docking procedure was smooth, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. Once they participated in this gathering, humanity would officially be in rebellion against the Confederation. There would be no diplomatic solution, no peaceful resolution that allowed them to maintain their status as a member species. As she prepared to disembark, Elena was joined by THYSS and Zura, who had volunteered to serve as representatives for the refugee community. The Korth's emerald scales had regained much of their former luster during the journey, while the ethereal's energy patterns had stabilized into a more consistently corporeal form. Human Captain, THYSS said, my people have an expression. The river that refuses to change course will eventually carve a canyon. Perhaps it is time for the Confederation to learn that some currents cannot be stopped. The airlocks cycled, and they stepped into Haven Base Alpha to find themselves in a bustling command center that defied the installation's modest external appearance. Dozens of humans worked at sensor stations and communication consoles, while holographic displays showed star charts that Elena recognized as covering most of human space and several neighboring sectors. Dr. Kim was waiting for them, but Elena barely recognized her former professor. The academic had been replaced by someone who carried herself like a seasoned military commander, her lab coat exchanged for practical field gear, and her usual gentle demeanor sharpened by obvious stress and determination. "Elena," Kim said, embracing her former student, "thank God you made it. And these must be our new allies." She extended her hand toward THYSS and then paused, realizing she wasn't sure about Korth greeting customs. THYSS solved the problem by extending his own clawed hand in return. "Dr. Kim, your species' reputation for adaptability is well-deserved. We are honored to join this resistance." Kim led them through the station, explaining what had been happening in the days since Elena's departure. The situation on Earth has deteriorated rapidly. The Confederation isn't just demanding cultural integration anymore. They're insisting on what they call biological optimization. They want to modify human genetics to make us more compatible with galactic civilization. Elena felt her stomach drop. Modify us how? Increased docility, reduced curiosity, enhanced compliance with authority structures. They're essentially trying to breed the humanity out of humanity. Kim stopped before a large display showing DNA sequences. "We've been analyzing genetic samples from other Confederation member species. Elena, every single one has been altered from their original baseline. The Confederation hasn't just been eliminating rebellious species. They've been neutering the ones they kept." Zara's energy field flickered rapidly, which Elena had learned was a sign of intense emotion. This explains much about Confederation behavior. We always wondered how so many diverse species could have such similar governmental and social structures. They were not choosing unity, they were being forced into conformity. Dr. Kim nodded grimly. "And that's not the worst part. We've discovered that the Confederation has been deliberately creating crises to justify their interventions. Those terrorist attacks that prompted the elimination of the seedling homeworld, Confederation Black Ops, the economic instability that led to the Korth Sun being collapsed, artificially manufactured by Confederation financial manipulation." Elena found herself leaning against a nearby console for support as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. They've been systematically eliminating every species with the potential to challenge their authority, or the independents to refuse their improvements, Kim confirmed. "Elena, the refugee testimonies you've brought us confirm what we've suspected for months. The Confederation isn't a galactic alliance. It's a colonial empire that operates by making its victims complicit in their own subjugation." A new voice joined the conversation, "which is why they have to be stopped before they finish with humanity." Elena turned to see Admiral Rebecca Torres, one of Earth's most decorated military commanders, approaching their group. Torres had a reputation for tactical brilliance and absolute integrity, but Elena had never expected to see her involved in what was essentially a treasonous conspiracy. "Admiral Torres," Elena said, coming to attention automatically. "At ease, Captain. We're past the point of normal military protocol." Torres gestured for them to follow her to a secure briefing room. "What we're about to discuss will be considered an act of war by the Confederation. I need to know that everyone here is fully committed to seeing this through, regardless of the consequences." Elena looked at THYSS and Zara, drawing strength from their quiet determination. These beings had already lost everything to the Confederation's version of galactic order. If they could find the courage to fight back, surely humanity could do the same. "Admiral, what do you need from us?" Torres activated a holographic display showing the positions of various fleets throughout human space and beyond. "The Confederation task force that's heading for Earth will arrive in approximately 6 days. We estimate they're carrying enough firepower to reduce our home planet to rubble if we resist their demands openly." Elena felt her heart sink, but Torres continued before she could voice her despair. "However, they're expecting to face a confused and divided humanity that's willing to negotiate for survival. They're not expecting to face a coordinated resistance that includes multiple species with intimate knowledge of Confederation tactics and technology." THYSS stepped forward, studying the tactical display. Admiral Torres, my people specialized in hyperspace navigation and logistics coordination. If you require assistance in moving ships and supplies without detection, we can provide calculations that the Confederation will not anticipate. Zara's energy form shifted into a more focused configuration. Ethereal energy manipulation techniques can disrupt Confederation sensors and communication systems. We can provide you with technological advantages they have never encountered in a military context. Dr. Kim pulled up another display showing resource allocation charts. We've been building a network of hidden bases throughout human space, staffed by scientists, military personnel, and civilians who refuse to accept Confederation integration. Each base is equipped with manufacturing capabilities, defensive systems, and the ability to support refugee populations. Elena studied the information, beginning to see the outline of something unprecedented. You're not just planning a resistance. You're planning to create an alternative to the Confederation itself. Admiral Torres smiled, the first genuinely optimistic expression Elena had seen from any of them. Elena, the refugees you rescued represent a dozen species that were supposedly extinct, but according to their testimony, there are hidden communities scattered throughout the galaxy, survivors who have been waiting for someone to give them hope that they could reclaim their freedom. The Confederation's greatest strength has always been its ability to isolate potential threats, Dr. Kim added. They eliminate leadership, scatter populations, and convince survivors that resistance is futile. But if we can prove that unity is possible, that different species can work together without sacrificing their identity. THYSS completed the thought. Then, every hidden community, every surviving enclave, every species that has been forced to live in fear will know that they are not alone. Elena felt something shifting in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced when she first decided to rescue the refugees. But this was larger, more profound. This was the moment when humanity stopped trying to fit into someone else's vision of galactic civilization and started creating their own. Admiral, what's our first move? Torres manipulated the holographic display, showing the approaching Confederation fleet. We're going to give them exactly what they're expecting, a seemingly helpless human fleet that's outgunned and desperate to negotiate. But while they're focused on our surrender, we're going to be implementing something the Confederation has never had to deal with, which is guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale, coordinated across dozens of species and hundreds of systems, with the goal of not just defeating the Confederation military, but dismantling their entire social control apparatus. Elena stared at the tactical projections, trying to comprehend the sheer audacity of what they were proposing. Admiral, you're talking about overthrowing the most powerful force in the galaxy. No, Captain. I'm talking about freeing the galaxy from the most oppressive force in the galaxy. There's a difference. Over the next several hours, Elena found herself immersed in planning sessions that redefined her understanding of what warfare could look like in the modern era. The traditional model of fleet battles and territorial conquest was being replaced by something far more sophisticated. A campaign designed to undermine the Confederation's authority by proving that their version of galactic unity was not only unnecessary, but actively harmful. The plan they developed was both elegant and complex. Human forces would engage the Confederation fleet in what appeared to be a conventional military confrontation, drawing their attention while carefully concealed strike teams carried out simultaneous operations against Confederation infrastructure throughout the galaxy. But these wouldn't be attacks designed to destroy. They would be liberation missions designed to free suppressed populations and expose the truth about Confederation policies. Refugee communities would serve as both intelligence sources and coordination points, their hidden networks providing the foundation for a galaxy-spanning resistance movement. Each successful liberation would provide more allies, more resources, and more proof that alternatives to Confederation rule were possible. The beauty of this approach, Dr. Kim explained, is that the Confederation's own propaganda becomes our greatest weapon. They've spent centuries claiming that their system prevents chaos and warfare. When we demonstrate that peaceful coexistence is possible without their control, their entire justification for existence collapses. Elena found herself assigned to a critical role in the plan. The New Horizon would serve as a mobile command center and refugee transport, using its advanced exploration systems to identify and contact hidden communities while staying ahead of Confederation pursuit. But more importantly, Elena and her diverse crew would serve as living proof that cooperation between species didn't require sacrificing individual identity. "Captain," Admiral Torres said as the planning session concluded, "I want you to understand something. What we're asking of you goes far beyond normal military service. You'll be operating independently, often without support, in some of the most dangerous regions of space. And you'll be carrying not just the hopes of humanity, but the future of every species that's ever dreamed of freedom." Elena looked around the briefing room at the assembled humans and aliens who had committed themselves to this unprecedented rebellion. 6 months ago, she had been a simple exploration captain, content to map star systems and make contact with new civilizations. Now she was being asked to help lead a galactic revolution. "Admiral, when I first decided to rescue those refugees, I thought I was just following basic human decency. I'm starting to realize that maybe human decency is exactly what the galaxy needs." As the meeting dispersed and the participants prepared to return to their ships, Elena found herself in conversation with THYSS and Zara. The three of them stood before a viewport showing the swirling colors of the Oort cloud, each lost in their own thoughts about what they were about to attempt. "Human Captain," THYSS said eventually, "my people have survived as refugees for nearly a decade. In all that time, we never believed we would see our homeworld again. But now you think there's a chance?" Elena asked. "Now I think there's something better than a chance. I think there's hope." The Korth turned to look at her directly. "Your species has given us something we had forgotten was possible. The belief that we can shape our own destiny rather than simply endure whatever others choose to inflict upon us." Zara's energy field pulsed in what Elena had learned was the ethereal equivalent of agreement. The Confederation teaches that unity requires uniformity. You humans demonstrate that true unity comes from celebrating diversity while working toward common goals. It is a revolutionary concept. Elena smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like armor. "Well then, let's go show the galaxy what revolution looks like." As the New Horizon undocked from Haven Base Alpha and began its journey back into the contested regions of space, Elena couldn't help but marvel at how far they had all come. The refugees in their cargo bay were no longer helpless survivors. They were strategic advisors and revolutionary leaders. The human crew was no longer just explorers. They were the vanguard of a movement that would reshape galactic civilization. Behind them, Admiral Torres's fleet was already beginning its carefully orchestrated dance with the approaching Confederation forces. Ahead of them lay the hidden communities and forgotten worlds that had been waiting for someone to prove that resistance was possible. The galaxy had cast them out, but humanity had taken them in. Now, together, they were going to take back the galaxy itself. Elena settled into her command chair and gave the order that would echo through history: set course for the Vega sector. It's time to wake up the revolution. 2 years after the first shots were fired in what historians would later call the Liberation War, Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Freedom Station, watching as ships from 47 different species docked at the massive orbital facility. The station hung in space above New Haven, a planet that had once been a barren rock in an unnamed system, but now served as the capital of the Galactic Free Alliance. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. What began as a desperate refugee rescue mission had evolved into a galaxy-spanning movement that fundamentally altered the balance of power among the stars. The Confederation still existed, but their territory had shrunk to less than a third of what they once controlled, and their authority was challenged daily by new worlds declaring independence. "Captain," came a familiar voice behind her. "The Council is ready for your final briefing." Elena turned to see Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun. Though both of their titles had become somewhat ceremonial in the new structure they had helped create. Chen now served as Director of Interspecies Coordination for the Free Alliance, while Elena had been appointed as the first human ambassador to the Council of Free Worlds. "How many species are represented in today's session?" Elena asked as they walked through corridors that bustled with beings of every conceivable form and function. 83 confirmed, with 12 more requesting observer status. The Seedling Collective just announced they've successfully restored ecosystem balance to 6 formerly dead worlds, and the Zephyrians have completed their new crystal computing network that will allow real-time communication across the entire free zone. Elena shook her head in amazement. The technological advances that had emerged from true interspecies cooperation were staggering. When different civilizations shared knowledge freely rather than hoarding it for competitive advantage, the rate of progress had accelerated beyond anything anyone had imagined possible. What about the Confederation fleet that was threatening the Deneb system? Admiral Torres reports they withdrew after the local population voted for independence. Apparently, the Confederation has decided that military enforcement is too costly when every action they take creates more refugees who flee to Free Alliance territory. As they entered the council chambers, Elena was struck by how different this gathering was from the formal, hierarchical assemblies that characterize Confederation governance. Representatives sat in a vast circular chamber where no position was considered more important than any other. Decisions were made through consensus building rather than majority rule, ensuring that minority voices were always heard and considered. THYSS was waiting for them near the speaker's platform, his emerald scales now bearing the intricate silver markings that indicated his status as an elder statesman among the free worlds. Beside him stood Zara, whose energy form had evolved to incorporate patterns and colors that Elena had learned represented different aspects of ethereal philosophy and experience. "Friends," THYSS greeted them, using the informal address that had become standard among Alliance leadership. "We have received word from the last of the deep space monitoring stations. The Confederation's attempt to blockade the Sagittarius arm has failed. 3 more systems declared independence overnight, and their populations are requesting assistance with transition planning." Elena took her place at the speaker's platform, looking out at the assembled representatives. Some were beings she recognized from those desperate first days aboard the New Horizon, while others represented species she had never encountered but who had joined the Alliance after learning that alternatives to Confederation rule were possible. "Colleagues," she began, 2 years ago, we rescued 47 refugees from a destroyed space station. Today, we're here to celebrate the fact that over 15 billion beings across the galaxy now live in free worlds, governed by principles of cooperation rather than domination. The chamber filled with the various sounds, lights, and energy patterns that represented approval among the different species present. Elena waited for the acknowledgments to die down before continuing. But this gathering isn't just about celebrating our successes. We're here to discuss how we prevent the Free Alliance from becoming what the Confederation was, a system that starts with noble intentions, but gradually becomes oppressive through the accumulation of unchecked power. This was the challenge that kept Elena awake at night. The Alliance had grown so rapidly and successfully that there was a real risk it could become the very thing it had been created to oppose. Some Alliance worlds were already beginning to pressure neighboring systems to adopt their governmental structures, and there were disturbing reports of economic sanctions being used against planets that chose different approaches to interspecies cooperation. Dr. Sarah Kim, now serving as the Alliance's chief science advisor, activated a holographic display showing population and resource distributions across Free Alliance territory. Our analysis indicates that we've reached a critical decision point. We can continue expanding through active recruitment and risk becoming an empire ourselves, or we can focus on perfecting the systems we've already established and let our example inspire others to find their own paths to freedom. Zara's energy field shifted into patterns that Elena had learned indicated deep philosophical contemplation. The question before us is whether we measure our success by how much territory we control or by how well we demonstrate that cooperative civilization is possible without coercion. A new voice joined the discussion from across the chamber. Perhaps the answer lies in remembering why we began this journey. Elena looked up to see Naya, the young seedling whose miraculous survival had inspired so many others during those first difficult months of the war. The plant being had grown considerably since their rescue, now standing nearly 3 meters tall, with a complex root system that allowed her to interface directly with the station's bioneural networks. Naya, Elena said warmly, what would you have us remember? That we succeeded not because we were stronger than the Confederation, but because we offered something they could not, the freedom for each species to remain themselves while contributing to a larger community. Naya's voice carried the musical undertones that characterized mature, seedling communication. If we begin forcing others to accept our way of life, we become no different from those who destroyed our original homes. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives considered this wisdom. It was THYSS who finally spoke. The young seedling speaks truth that we elders would do well to heed. Perhaps our greatest victory would be to prove that an interstellar civilization can thrive without ever forcing membership upon others. Over the next several hours, the Council engaged in the kind of thoughtful, nuanced debate that had become the hallmark of free alliance governance. Rather than rushing toward quick decisions, they explored the implications of various approaches, considered the perspectives of species who weren't present, and worked to find solutions that would honor their founding principles while adapting to changed circumstances. Elena found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. The terrified refugees they had rescued were now leaders and innovators who had helped reshape galactic civilization. The human crew of the New Horizon had evolved from explorers to diplomats to architects of a new kind of interstellar community. But, perhaps most importantly, they had proven that the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in unity imposed from above, but in diversity celebrated and protected through voluntary cooperation. Ambassador Vasquez, came a voice from the communications section. We're receiving a transmission from the Andromeda contact station. It appears we've received our first communication from another galaxy entirely. Elena felt her pulse quicken. The Free Alliance had always known that their local galactic cluster was just one of countless others scattered throughout the universe. If another galaxy was reaching out to them, it suggested that the principles they had fought for might have implications far beyond anything they had originally imagined. Put it through to the main chamber, she said. The holographic display shifted to show a being unlike anything any of them had encountered before, vaguely insectoid, but with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. When it spoke, the universal translator had to work for several moments before finding approximations for concepts that had no equivalent in any known language. Greetings, entities of the Milky Way galaxy. We are representatives of the Cooperative of Free Thought from what you designate as Galaxy NGC 4594. We have observed your resistance to the hierarchical domination system that we recognize as similar to challenges we have faced in our own region of space. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. If other galaxies were dealing with Confederation-like oppression, then the scope of the problem was far larger than anyone had suspected. The being continued. We offer knowledge exchange and mutual support in the ongoing effort to preserve diversity of thought and culture across the cosmos. We believe that cooperative entities must support each other if we are to prevent the emergence of universe-spanning homogenization. The council chamber erupted in a symphony of excited communications as representatives realized they were witnessing the birth of not just an interstellar alliance, but a cosmic one. Elena looked around at her colleagues, beings who had once been refugees, outcasts, and survivors, and realized that their small act of defiance aboard the New Horizon had sparked something that was expanding far beyond their galaxy. "HFY," she said quietly to her old friend. "When you told me the humans had shown you something you thought was impossible, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" The elderly quartz scales shifted to the deep blue color that indicated profound contentment among his people. "Human Elena, when my people first developed mathematics, we learned that even the smallest variable can alter the trajectory of the largest system. You helped us remember that hope is the most powerful variable of all." As the council session continued and formal diplomatic protocols were established with their new galactic neighbors, Elena found herself drawn once again to the observation deck, where this phase of her journey had begun. The stars looked the same as they had 2 years ago, but everything about humanity's relationship with the cosmos had changed. The galaxy had cast them out, and humanity had taken them in. But more than that, humanity had helped them remember that they deserved better than mere survival. They deserved freedom, dignity, and the right to determine their own destiny. Now, as communication networks began forming between galaxies, and the principles of cooperative civilization spread across unimaginable distances, Elena understood that their small rebellion had become something unprecedented in the history of the universe. They hadn't just challenged one oppressive system. They had proven that alternatives were possible on any scale. They had demonstrated that diversity was strength, that cooperation was more powerful than domination, and that the courage to help others was the foundation of true civilization. Behind her, the Council continued its work of building frameworks for cosmic cooperation. Ahead of her, the stars held promise of new allies, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that the universe was large enough for every species to find their own path to happiness and fulfillment. The refugee crisis that began with 47 survivors had become a galactic renaissance. The rescue mission that started with one ship and one crew had evolved into a movement that spanned multiple galaxies. And at the heart of it all was a simple principle that humanity had carried with them from their small blue planet to the farthest reaches of space. That the measure of a civilization was not in what it could destroy or control, but in what it chose to protect and nurture. As Elena watched ships from dozens of species dock at Freedom Station, she knew that their work was far from over. There would always be those who preferred domination to cooperation, uniformity to diversity, fear to hope. But now there was proof that alternatives existed, and there were allies ready to defend those alternatives across the cosmos. The galaxy had cast them out, but humanity had taken them in. And in doing so, they had helped create something that would echo through eternity, a universe where every species, every culture, every unique way of understanding existence could thrive without fear of extinction or assimilation. The stars continued their ancient dance, but now they danced to a new rhythm, one composed of countless voices singing in harmony while maintaining their individual songs. It was the music of freedom, and it would never be silenced again.